Hi, it's Dr. Z. In this section, I will be describing schizophrenia and personality disorders. By the end of this video, you will identify the positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia and explain personality disorders. Please feel free to pause the video at any time to take notes. Now, what happens when you lose contact with reality? Have you ever had a moment when you weren't sure if something was real or not? Imagine that brief sensation multiplied by 100 times. Schizophrenia is a severe psychological disorder that is characterized by highly disordered thinking. The word schizophrenia comes from the Greek, which means split and mind. In other words, the mind is splitting from itself. Now, unlike dissociation, individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia have a loss of contact with reality. So, what does that really mean? Well, it's about psychosis. Psychosis is a state in which a person's perceptions and thoughts are just fundamentally removed from reality. In other words, an individual may hear voices or see things that other people cannot. Individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia may also be referred to as psychotic when they experience these episodes of psychosis. What does schizophrenia look like? Well, schizophrenia classifies symptoms into two categories, positive and negative symptoms. Positive symptoms refers to the plus sign in math, where you are adding behavior, but in this case, the adding of the behavior is abnormal or deviant. Hallucinations can be considered an imaginary sensation. More specifically, they're sensory experiences that occur in the absence of real stimuli. In other words, individuals with schizophrenia may report seeing a person who isn't really there. Hallucinations can be visual or auditory, meaning they can hear voices or they can see things that aren't there. Delusions. Delusions are false, unusual, and sometimes magical beliefs that are not really generally shared by others in the culture. One type of delusion is called a delusion of persecution. This type of delusion is when an individual has the false idea that someone's trying to harass, cheat, spy on, or conspire against them. Basically, they think that someone's out to get them. This photo is of the film A Beautiful Mind, which tells the real-life story of John Nash, a brilliant mathematician who is experiencing schizophrenia and particularly has delusions of persecution. Thought disorder refers to the unusual and sometimes bizarre thinking that occurs with the positive symptoms of schizophrenia. For example, individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia may have confused or just disorganized speech, basically making no sense when they're speaking. Referential thinking refers to the tendency to give personal meaning to completely random events. For example, the individual may think that everyone is looking at them when they enter into the room late. Affect is just a fancy word for emotion. In this case, inappropriate affect is when the individual displays emotions that are not appropriate or at odds with the situation. For example, the individual starts laughing when there's no reason to laugh during a serious conversation. An inappropriate affect also reflects their facial expressions, their tone of voice, and gestures because they don't reflect emotions. They're kind of just there. Negative symptoms refer to the negative sign in math, where you're subtracting or having a loss of or a decrease in normal functions. Individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia may exhibit social withdrawal by spending less and less time with friends and family. They self-isolate. Speech and hygiene tend to be decreased or limited. As a result of psychosis, the individual may also have a distorted sense of time. A flat affect refers to showing practically no emotional response at all, even if they report feeling that emotion. So individuals may speak in a monotone voice or have a blank facial expression and act like robots. This photo is from the film Donnie Darko, where the main character of Donnie begins to exhibit social withdrawal and a distorted sense of time. Now, due to the severity of the disorder, much research has been conducted on the potential causes that could contribute to the development of schizophrenia. While biological, psychological, and sociocultural factors are involved in schizophrenia, there is overwhelming evidence for a biological origin. And so here are 3 examples of the biological factors in schizophrenia. Heredity indicates that schizophrenia may be linked to genes, which means if someone in your family has been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the past, the risk factor increases for developing schizophrenia within that family. Research has also found abnormalities in certain brain structures, like the size of the brain ventricles. And most importantly, studies have found ample evidence that the neurotransmitter dopamine plays a role in schizophrenia. Well, let's transition to the other psychological disorder in this section, and let's talk about what happens when your personality is maladaptive. Recall that maladaptive means poor adapting, or a behavior characteristic that impacts daily functioning. Do you know someone who is just impossible to get along with and who always tends to blame others for his or her own problems? Well, what if who you are as a person, your very identity, impacts your daily functioning? Sounds bad, doesn't it? Well, it can be if an individual is diagnosed with a personality disorder. Personality disorders are a chronic, maladaptive pattern of behavior that are thoroughly integrated into an individual's personality. Personality disorders are more common than people think, with about 15% in the United States exhibiting symptoms of personality disorder. Now, personality disorders often begin in early childhood or adolescence because it's a long-standing or chronic pattern of behavior. Because of their difficulty in getting along with others, individuals with personality disorders may have unstable work and social histories. There are 10 personality disorders listed in the DSM-5. I will discuss the 2 personality disorders that have been studied the most. Antisocial personality disorder is a psychological disorder where the individual exhibits guiltlessness or just a lack of remorse for doing things. Law-breaking, where they fail to conform to social norms and don't bother obeying the law. Exploitation of others. This is where the individual may use their charm to take advantage or mistreat others. Irresponsibility. This involves being just inconsistent with work and paying bills. And finally, deceit. This often involves lying and conning others for personal profit or for personal pleasure. While antisocial personality disorder is associated with criminal behavior, not all individuals with this personality disorder become criminals. This photo of the film Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile tells the true story of serial killer Ted Bundy, who was actually diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder. This disorder involves a pervasive pattern of instability. When I say instability, it's just not stable and just constantly in flux and in change. This pervasive pattern of instability is involved in 3 areas. Interpersonal relationships, so this includes family, friends, romantic partners, and coworkers. Self-image, this has to do with their view of themselves and their identity. And then emotions. They tend to be all over the place with emotions, hostile, aggressive, and impulsive as well. Individuals with borderline personality disorder often engage in self-harm. This self-harm can include self-mutilation, like cutting or burning themselves, suicidal gestures or threats, and even suicidal attempts. This photo is from the film Girl Interrupted, where one of the main characters appears to meet the criteria for borderline personality disorder. In summary, schizophrenia and personality disorders are extreme cases of psychological disorders. Understanding these disorders is the first step in helping individuals who are experiencing these types of symptoms. The photos used in this video are property of the above-mentioned films.